Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. The Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program is a 30-minute radio intervention support program that is meant to provide continuous instruction to keep you academically engaged during this stay-at-home period, as well as preparing you, our 6th, 9th, and 12th graders for the pending Liberia Primary School Certificate Exam, Liberia Junior High School Certificate Exam, and West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Exam when the time comes. Also, in addition to this academic support, the program is meant to provide psychosocial support for learners, teachers, and parents, and also tips on how you as parents and teachers can provide support to your students and children at home. Now, let's join our teacher for today's lesson.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Charles Gbollie. Today, we have some important information for you, especially our beloved teachers. For parents who are also interested in helping your children at home, this lesson is also important for you. Our focus is on what every successful person or would-be successful person takes very seriously. And I'm sure you want to be successful, right? Great. Therefore, this topic is for you. Our topic for today is focusing on lesson planning. Please take your pen and copybook and get ready for today's lesson. Again, welcome and let's learn together. As you prepare for this lesson, please stay tuned as we take a very important message.
Coronavirus is spread via droplets. When the person coughs or sneezes, the droplets land on surfaces and are picked up on the hands of others and spread further. People catch the virus when they touch their infected hands to their mouth, nose, or eyes. It follows that the single most important thing you can do to protect yourself is keep your hands clean by washing them frequently with soap and water or hand sanitizer.
Welcome back, listeners, to today's lesson. Again, welcome to our lesson. Like I said from the introduction, today we are looking at lesson planning. So in this lesson, we are going to first learn about the learning process. After that, we'll look at lesson plan and its objectives. In this lesson as well, we'll learn about the parts of a good lesson plan. And finally, we'll learn about steps for preparing a lesson plan. Again, welcome. We are very happy to have you with us as we all learn together. First of all, why have we decided to talk about such lesson on the radio? Does it mean that our teachers don't know how to plan their lessons? Not at all. Then why? Okay, I'm going to tell you why we need to talk about this on the radio as we continue to provide teaching by radio. As a matter of fact, this is part of the teaching tips through the radio. I asked a question, why do we need to learn this on the radio? And then I said, it's not because our teachers don't have training or knowledge about lesson planning. And then I promised to give you some reasons why, right? Great. Okay, let me give you the first reason why this is important. Number one, learning is not a one-time thing. Again, learning is not a one-time thing. That means we must learn over and over to become masters. Imagine you eating this morning. By lunchtime or evening time, you'll be hungry, right? Yes. That's how learning is like. So even if you did lesson planning when you went to the institution when the teaching was taking place or to your teacher training, it does not mean that you can continue to learn. Learning does not end there. Number 2, continuous professional development is the key for every successful career. Again, continuous professional development is key for every successful career. It means that all successful teachers learn every day. And as our teachers who are helping to transmit knowledge, we must learn every day. Okay? This also means that no one is too big to learn. All of us must be lifelong learners. Okay, that's great. Now you know why we are talking about this lesson. So I feel more comfortable to talk to you about lesson planning on the radio today. Okay, you have heard this before about planning. So let me start with a popular quote. It says, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Again, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. This saying has come about a long time ago, but it is still important every day. That is why we're talking about lesson planning today. But before we go in depth to learn about lesson planning, first, let me remind us about the learning process. Let me remind us about the learning process. In order to plan for our students, even for us parents, we must know how our children or how the students learn. When you don't know about something, it will be very hard for you to plan for it. So first, we must have the important knowledge about the students in order for us to have a plan for them. That is why we are starting at this point. The learning process. Well, we know that in order for learning to take place, there must be change in the behavior of students that will have to take place. They will have to be engaged in the learning process for some changes to happen. Now, these changes may happen in different areas. Could you name any of the areas these changes normally take place? Great. If you need verbal information, for example, or intellectual skills, or cognitive skills or strategies, you are correct. Yes, in order for learning to take place, there must be the provision of verbal information, like facts, maybe like names, like principles, and other generalizations also. For example, we may give our students facts about the independence when Liberia got her independence. 1847, right? July 26, 1847. And sometimes we give names, principles, and other important things. We are also interested in making sure that there is improvement in the intellectual skills of our students. That means that we must arrange the lessons for them to be from much easier to more complex. All right? So learning will require thinking. It will require some memorization it will also require some problem solving as well. At the same time, we must be aware that our students must change in their attitudes. The students' feelings towards a particular thing or object or idea also needs to be shifted. So, for example, if we have an attitude of not coming on time, or we have an attitude of not washing our hands, especially in this time, definitely there must be learning that is tailored towards helping our students. We also need to, especially for our young learners, strengthen their motor skills, their ability to exercise their bodies or have certain movement skills to help them through. That's great. So those are the things that we need to know about the learning process of the students. We talk about different skills and changes that must happen. So whenever you are planning for students, make sure you consider them, view them ahead of time. Imagine the students sitting in the class that you are going to be teaching. Very good. Now we are moving on to lesson plan and its objectives. Remember the saying, if we don't plan, we are planning to fail. You don't want to fail, right? Yes, you don't want to fail. I also don't want to fail. And if we must not fail, it means that we must be able to do the right things. So there is nothing good that we'll be able to do in an organized way or in an effective way without planning for it. So we need to plan in order for us to know exactly why it should be so or why it should happen that way. So lesson planning actually, like many of us know, is just providing the specifics or the specifications, the details about the objectives that we would like for our students to achieve. That is, in terms of trying to match the content, the methods that we're going to use to make sure that a particular lesson is taught. The pilots, those who are in the planes, they cannot move without having a map. They need a compass. Teachers also, is not okay for us to get to the class without having any clear plan for instruction. That is why we need to have a very good lesson plan in order for us to achieve good objectives in the classroom. So the main objective of us having a plan is so that our class will be guided, our class will be organized, and the information will flow. You will not be checking all around, or what I'm supposed to do this time, or what I'm supposed to do that time. Everything will be neatly together. Also, we have a particular goal to achieve. And for today, we want us to be reminded that planning our lesson is very important for us to achieve the desired result and make sure we make the difference in the lives of our learners. So we have specific goals, or we have a specific goal we want to achieve every time we enter class. And through a plan, you can be able to move through the method, the procedure, and then at the end, you'll be able to fulfill that. Wonderful. So there are three key things or three key components, we call them components or parts, when we are planning. So be reminded about the learning objectives, also the learning activities, and then assessment to check whether the students have understood what has been taught. So every good plan must have these three key components. All right, the learning objectives, the learning activities, and plan to assess the students. All right, more than that, a lesson plan provides you with a general outline of what you are going to accomplish in the particular class that we told you about. Have you any question about this so far? We've just told you our first focus on how students learn and have that in mind. And then the second part is to understand exactly what a plan is, which we said it provides important specific information about what we're going to do regarding content and teaching methods. We also discussed shortly about the three key components that do go in a particular lesson plan, including learning objectives, learning activities, and assessment to check whether the students have truly learned what they should have learned. Wonderful. Okay, so before we go to our break, let's have one more thing to talk about, and that is parts of a good lesson plan, or sometimes we call them elements of a good lesson plan. Before going into that, let me ask you some questions that are important when you are making a plan. Number one, what am I teaching? What am I teaching? It's an important question that we need to answer in order for us to have a good lesson. Another question is, who am I teaching? Who am I teaching? Remember the learning process. We must know how students learn in order for us to prepare and teach them properly. Question number 3. I will give you 4 questions. Question number 3, how will I teach it? Okay? How will I teach it? And then finally, do my students understand what I teach? So these are 4 important questions we need to take into consideration regarding lesson planning. I believe you are taking notes, so I'm going to read them over for you. If you have any error along the way, you can now use this time to correct it. Question 1, what am I teaching? Question 2, who am I teaching? Question 3, how will I teach it? And question 4, do my students understand? So these are important questions for consideration as we plan our lesson. Now let's go into some elements or some parts of a good lesson plan. Now, in a good lesson plan, we know that there should be a sequence or what we call AAA model for planning. Okay, AAA model for planning speaks about a sequence of activating, acquiring new learning, and applying the learning. That's why we have AAA. One is for activating learning, making sure that you encourage students from the start to be interested in the material that you are going to teach or you are about to teach, and then 2, acquiring new information, delivering new information, and providing means for them to apply the information. Now, for every lesson plan, we have different parts. We have, like, for example, title, we have the time, the duration. For example, this program is for 30 minutes. The list of materials that we are going to use, our objectives that we talked about earlier, and the knowledge that is going to be acquired as a result of this particular lesson. We should be able, as part of having a good plan, to have instructional component. Of course, all of us, or many of us, know this, that this is where we place events that make up the lesson. It's a place for instruction where appropriate guided practice by students is provided. It also provides the opportunity for independent practice. Okay, opportunity for independent practice. So the practice session allows students to be able to practice what they've learned. So an important element also is the summary that should be able to wrap up the entire lesson for the understanding of the students. And then as well, we need to have an aspect to evaluate whether what has been taught is really been mastered by the learners who it is meant for. Great job so far. Thanks for the progress. Well, we can learn more if we ourselves make it our responsibility to research more and make learning a daily thing. Now, we are going to take a short break now to bring you this very, very important message. I cannot overemphasize very, very important. Afterwards, we are going to talk about the steps for preparing a good lesson plan. All of us adults need to pay serious attention to this message because our safety matters. So please observe all the safety measures and also help your child, your children, your friends, and encourage them to also follow same. You'll be protecting yourself, you'll be protecting your community, and you'll be protecting your country and our world as a whole. Coronavirus is real. Let's keep safe.
Hello, students. My name is Mr. Sayo Amazing, a gospel artist. That's like the song Jehovah Bless Me. He took me from nowhere to somewhere. Took me from nowhere to somewhere. Jehovah took me from nowhere to somewhere. You took me from nowhere to somewhere. Jehovah took me from nowhere to somewhere. Well, I've come to tell you about this coronavirus. Wash your hands as many times as possible with soap and water. Use tissue while coughing. Use tissue while sneezing. Remember, clean hands stop diseases. Let's keep learning while we are still at our very homes. Took me from nowhere to somewhere. Jehovah took me from nowhere to somewhere. You took me from nowhere to somewhere. Jehovah took me from nowhere to somewhere.
Thank you so much. Let's go back to class. At this point, we are going to look at 6 steps in preparing a good lesson plan. I know we are talking to teachers in particular and parents as well. And we are adults and we can learn very fast. So definitely I will give you these 6 steps very quickly. But may I ask you, if you sit by yourself, what these 6 steps for preparing a lesson plan could be? List them. Great. Now listen carefully as I will list and describe or discuss some of the steps in planning a lesson every time. Number 1, in having a good lesson plan, we must be able to identify the learning objectives. Remember, at the start of this lesson, we provided key objectives that we want to achieve in this lesson. For example, we talk about the learning process, lesson planning objectives, and so forth. So first, we must be able to clearly define our objectives we want to achieve. And hence, our curriculum, in most cases, set out these objectives. And as we are making the sub-plan from there, please make sure that your objectives are very clear. If you have heard what we call SMART, meaning specific, measurable, accurate, and time-bound, then your objective should be as smart as possible so that when you achieve it, you won't be looking as if you don't know whether it's achieved or not. You feel real that yes, it has been achieved. So a learning objective describes what the learner will know or will be able to learn at the end of the lesson, or what they will be able to experience as they go through the lesson. In most cases, we have to have it written in the language that is easily understood by the students and easily related to a particular program learning outcomes. For example, we stated our objectives for this lesson and we pick up from there. So the first thing for us to have a good lesson plan is, yes, identify learning objectives. So parents, you can do this as well. Maybe you want to teach your child about hygiene at home, about hand washing, about anything that you want your child to learn. You can provide or write a clear objective and begin to apply the same instruction as we have mentioned earlier. Number 2, we need to have specific activities for this to happen. Now, the objectives are not the end of it. They are just the beginning of it. They provide the chance for us to design activities to help the learning to take place as we have mentioned in our objectives. So the second thing we need to consider very importantly is for us to have specific learning activities that we are going to have for this to happen. And this, as we said, must be directly related to the learning objectives and provide experiences that the students will be able to engage in, to be able to practice, and to gain feedback on specific progress towards these objectives. Let's go to number 3. We need to plan to assess student understanding. So after you have clearly defined your objectives, and then you have prepared the activities and you've executed the activities, of course, you cannot leave it like that and think that everything has been done. That's where we have assessments. So there must be room for students to be assessed. It's only meant to determine whether there has been significant or there have been good changes in the behavior of students. And then for us to give them some important feedback to help them move forward. So planning for assessment is important because it allows you to find out whether the teaching or the learning really taking place. Number 4, we need to make sure our lesson is engaging, and we should also make sure it is meaningful as well. Okay, so we need to make sure the learning is engaging and meaningful to the learner. How do we do that? We have to pay keen attention to what we are doing. We have to be able to inform the learners what really we want them to get. We want to make sure we encourage them, we motivate them in order for them to link prior knowledge to the current information we are trying to present. Also, then we present the new knowledge and provide guidance for them through this. At the same time, we provide the practice and feedback and assess them to make sure it is possible for them to retain and as well transfer the knowledge. So the 4th thing we need to do in our lesson planning for it to be good is to make sure that our lesson is engaging and meaningful. And we can do that once again by gaining the attention of learners, by informing learners about their objectives, by encouraging or stimulating them to recall prior knowledge, and then we present the current information. For example, we may be teaching 6th graders about countries and capitals and other things, and then we can link that to maybe in 8th grade or 9th grade talking about landlocked, or we're talking about coastline countries, so that you can be able to link the current information based on past information. And this is important to keep the learning engaging. Number 5, we need to create a realistic timing for the activities or things that we are presenting, and as well manage the time properly. Of course, if we don't manage the time properly, we will not be able to deliver our lesson and achieve our lesson goals. What do you think may be the final thing we need to do to make sure we have a proper lesson plan? Oh yes, the proper lesson plan must have the concluding part of it. Every lesson must be able to present a summary of what has been learned so that it can serve as reinforcement. So we can do the closing by summarizing, reviewing, or demonstrating their understanding of major points. So we can do our closing by summarizing, reviewing, and demonstrating that yes, this has been done properly. We can also do that by making sure we link some ideas to previous knowledge and giving instances to this. We can also bring about practical situations to be able to help the learner. But one important strategy is for us to be able to ask a student, or we can ask some students to be able to state what they have learned. So if I ask you now, what have you learned so far in this lesson? You will be able to provide a good summary of what has been presented to you. So you can ask the students to either say it or to write it down in order for them to have a say regarding this. Well, listeners, we are glad that you followed this lesson for today are meant to provide some tips or some refresher for our teachers and parents. As you are learning by radio, you also have the chance to keep teaching as well. You teach your children at home and others and keep being abreast with important information in your field in order for you to keep on track. And when schools resume, you will be able to perform accordingly. That is why we've been able to treat this lesson on lesson planning, which is very, very important. Remember, one of our key codes is that if we fail to plan, we are planning to fail. So it's very important for us to take lesson planning and even planning our life, our activities very seriously. So in this lesson, we've talked about the learning process, how students learn. We said that students learn through different means, and as teachers, we must take into consideration the different skills. We must take into consideration the different strategies that are used for learning to take place. We must take into consideration the verbal information, the attitudes, the motor skills, and so forth of the learners. We said that we cannot plan well for the learners if we don't know them. We also discuss lesson plan and its objectives and how this works. We also talk about the elements or parts of a lesson plan. Then finally, we talk about steps for preparing a lesson plan. I believe that this lesson was meaningful to you, and I would like to encourage you to continue learning at home and sharing your knowledge with your family members and friends. Until we come your way next time, I have been Dr. Charles Gbollie, your teacher. If you have any questions or need clarification on today's lesson, please text to the following numbers. Again, if you have any questions or need clarification, please text it to the following numbers: 0886 554 670. Again, 0886 554 670 or 0777 554 670. Again, 0777 554 670. Keep safe. Amen. Amen.